Jesse James, America's most mythologized outlaw, isn't standing under a spotlight in a packed saloon tonight, or basking in the glow of some larger-than-life campfire legend. If you strip away every movie, costume, and dime novel poster, what you're left with isn't a hero, but a man fighting for his next breath, wounded, caked in mud at dawn, gnawing cold, slimy beans right out of the tin. His shirt is soaked with sweat and stuck to a filthy chest bandage. His hair is greasy and matted, and his mouth tastes like copper and gunpowder. Not a lawman in sight, but the whole world is hunting for him. This is Jesse James as he actually lived, messy, desperate, and nothing like the legend people bought in the cheap seats. And honestly, it's no mystery why his story was cleaned up for polite company. The public wanted a sharp-looking hero, riding tall, cracking jokes, and eating hearty meals by the fire, always one wink ahead of the law. That's what sells. But the real question is, what did Jesse James actually go through, day by day? What did he eat? What did he wear? How did he smell after weeks ducking from barn to brush, with a bullet still lodged in his chest and a bounty on his head? Today, we're digging into the humbling, often disgusting, always physical reality of outlaw survival. Let's set the stage. Jesse James grew up in Missouri, on a slave-holding farm that turned into a war zone the moment the Civil War broke out. Clay County was torn apart by Union loyalists and Confederate raiders, and Jesse's family was right in the crossfire. His stepfather was tortured, Jesse himself was whipped, and his mother was left to stitch wounds and scrape together meals from whatever survived the latest raid. By the time Jesse could ride a horse, violence and deprivation were already his normal. He carried those habits and scars into his outlaw years. For more than a decade after the war, Jesse James lived as a fugitive. He took bullets, at least 2, with one stuck so deep in his chest it never came out. He spent months hiding in thick Missouri woods and rocky outcrops, always just ahead of Pinkerton detectives, local posses, and eventually, even some ex-friends who'd had enough of the disaster. Survival wasn't just about dodging bullets or keeping one eye open at night. It was a daily grind for food, shelter, safety, and, when things went wrong, a desperate struggle to keep wounds from festering. What do we actually know about Jesse's daily life? Not much, at least not from his own hand. There's no diary, no list of favorite shirts, no menu of outlaw delicacies. What we do know comes from hostile newspapers, period accounts, and bits pieced together from the people who chased him. The reality is simple. Most days on the run meant little food, rarely changing filthy clothes, and sometimes weeks without a proper bath. Sources talk about hunger, exhaustion, and the misery of being hunted. Jesse's menu was whatever he could steal: scrounge or beg, a cold tin of beans, a strip of dried bacon, some stale bread, and, if luck ran dry, nothing at all. And his clothes matched the menu, dirty, torn, and pretty much fused to his skin. Outlaw life wasn't a fashion contest. If Jesse ever got a clean shirt or socks, odds are he swapped at a farmhouse or yanked them off a line in the dark. Personal grooming? Forget it. You might carry a comb, but if you're running from the law with a chest wound that won't heal, greasy hair and a beard full of grit are the least of your problems. But here's the first real medical challenge: Jesse's wounds. He wasn't just running dirty, he was running hurt. After he took a bullet to the chest, he spent weeks clinging to life, nursed by family with no real medicine, just whatever rags and home remedies they had. Even when he was back on his feet, every moment was a gamble. Pain, infection, and the hassle of hiding. Blood soaking into dirty cloth wasn't just gross. It attracted flies and made every new scratch a risk for infection. Forget those movie scenes where a bullet graze, gets a neat bandage, and the hero rides off. Jesse's reality was blood, sweat, grit, and the constant threat that a dirty shirt would turn a wound fatal. Picture Jesse James on the run, awake in the dark, clothes glued to his skin, bandage damp on his chest, ears straining for dogs or hooves. His stomach aches, part hunger, part punishment from greasy beans and creek water that tastes like iron. Outlaw menus don't come with choices. Nobody hiding out 2 counties from home was dreaming of 3 squares a day. Most meals were whatever you could scavenge. Stale bread, salt, pork, maybe a scrape of beans from the bottom of a can. Some days, nothing at all. Honestly, if you've ever gone camping with a can of beans and a good bedroll, you were doing better than Jesse James most weeks on the run. The difference is, outlaw meals weren't just bad, they were desperate. Half your food is cold, eaten in silence, always with one ear tuned for boots in the dark. On a good day, maybe you scored a biscuit or coffee from a friendly farmhouse, but even that was risky. A wanted poster on the wall could turn a meal into a manhunt. Most of the time, it was scavenging or risking theft, and every mouthful tasted like anxiety. And once you ate, well, all that food has to go somewhere. Outlaw toileting? Just one more gamble. There's no polite way to say it. You're squatting in the brush or a barn loft, hoping you don't leave tracks for a bounty hunter's dog. No chamber pots, no outhouses, unless you were lucky enough to sleep near a kitchen for a night. The usual reality? Pick a tree and try not to get shot while you're at your most vulnerable. Forget privacy. Forget comfort. If you think the movies leave out how awkward this got, you're right. Hygiene wasn't just neglected. It was nearly impossible. Most folks in post-war Missouri managed a bath once a week if the water was warm and they had the time. Jesse James? He couldn't risk a fire to heat water, and he sure couldn't afford to strip down in case he needed to run. Washing up meant splashing your face and hands in a freezing creek and hoping it was enough to fool your own nose. As the days dragged on, his hair would mat with sweat and dirt, his beard would itch against the crusted bandage on his neck, and the skin beneath his shirt developed its own layer of sour, relentless grime. Now add bugs, and I don't mean just a few. Lice were practically a given for anyone on the run, stuck in the same clothes for weeks. Jesse likely carried a louse comb, which is about as glamorous as it sounds. Using it meant stopping, stripping your hat and scarf, and hunting for tiny monsters by firelight, assuming you dared risk a fire. Imagine what that did to a wound. An oozing chest bandage, sticky with old blood and fresh sweat, was practically an open invitation to flies and infection. Every scratch could open a scab. Every bite could turn a minor wound into something far nastier. Sleep? Only in theory. Jesse's bed was usually a patch of dirt, a pile of hay, or the rough planks of an abandoned shack. Sleeping with a bullet wound, 3 layers of muddy clothing, and mosquitoes finding every gap in the fabric was a nightly ordeal. If you got 2 hours in a row, you were lucky. Over time, the exhaustion got brutal. Your mind frayed, patience snapped, and even the toughest outlaw stared into the dark, wondering if the next sunrise would be his last. That's where the legend really breaks down. As the months ticked by, every small misery added up. Hunger became bone-deep fatigue. A dirty shirt became a rash. Then an infection risk. A few sleepless nights became full-blown paranoia. Even his own gang started keeping their distance, not because they didn't trust Jesse, but because he was irritable, unpredictable, and, frankly, he reeked. Physical misery stacked up until it threatened to bring him down just as surely as any sheriff's bullet. By the middle of his fugitive years, Jesse James wasn't just fighting the law. He was fighting his own collapsing body. The farther he got from civilization, the more dirt, exhaustion, and infection became his main enemies. Food, sleep, clean water, a fresh shirt, these were survival, not luxury. The real daily battle was with filth, hunger, bugs, and pain. The longer it went, the more Jesse James the man was ground down by the same land that made him famous. And then comes the end game, the part the dime novels never mention. Sooner or later, even the toughest body breaks. By the late 1870s, years of sleeping wet and wounded, half-starved and jittery, left Jesse a physical wreck. Thin, stiff, sometimes limping, skin marked by scars and raw patches from old lice, bandages never fully clean. Dirt had practically worked its way into his skin and hair for good. His wounds became their own world of suffering. Jesse carried a bullet in his chest for years, one lung never right, breathing shallow, coughing up blood and pus when the weather turned cold. No real rest, no real healing. Every bandage stuck, tore away with fresh blood, and the stench made even his own allies glad to ride upwind. Infection meant fever, delirium, and the real risk that one bad night might be his last. And every day, Jesse put the same filthy shirt and lice-crawling drawers back over those wounds. There was no antiseptic, no stack of clean linens. If he was lucky, maybe a splash of whiskey to dull the pain. The only thing that changed was how much dirt and blood everything had soaked up over the years. But here's an angle you'll never see in the movies. The collapse wasn't just physical, it was social. When the filth and paranoia got too much, even Jesse's gang started avoiding him. Trust wore thin. Jesse became unpredictable, short-tempered, and, honestly, almost unbearable. The body's decline dragged down his mind. By the end, Jesse James was isolated not just by the price on his head, but by the reality of his own survival. And let's not gloss over how it ended. The Robin Hood of Missouri, the man who robbed trains with style, probably died with an infected, oozing wound under his shirt. The bullet that finally killed him was just the last in a long, dirty war going on inside his body for years. Pus, fever, ragged breath, sleepless nights, hunger, and pain. By the time Robert Ford pulled the trigger, Jesse's body was already losing a much slower, filthier fight. Even laid out in a suit for the crowds, Jesse James probably still smelled of sweat and infection, no matter how much cologne or powder they used. The myth was cleaned up for display, but the man beneath never got that luxury. So, next time you see the Hollywood version, Jesse, sharp as a Bowie knife, charming the crowd, remember what the real evidence says. The legend was all style. The reality was survival. Food, sleep, clean water, and a shirt without old bloodstains were miracles. In the end, Jesse James didn't outgun the law or outsmart his enemies. He just outlasted filth, fever, and hunger a little longer than anyone expected, until he didn't. If you're curious about what happened to outlaw bodies after death, the funerals, the embalming, the final indignities, stick around for a future episode. But for now, whenever the Wild West outlaw comes to mind, forget the dashing anti-hero. Picture the man alone in the dark, scratching at lice, shivering in his own dirt, and fighting for one more filthy, hungry, battered sunrise.